Alright guys, you've seen the build, you've seen the reactions, but today I'm pulling back the curtains on one of the biggest questions everyone's been asking me. How much did it actually cost to build this fake Lamborghini? Did we pull off the supercar look on a budget, or did this project spiral out of control? From the donor car to the bodywork, custom parts, and even the unexpected expenses, I'm breaking it down dollar for dollar. So before you start planning your own Lambo on a budget build, let's break down whether it was actually worth it.
Whilst a lot of the parts for this build were supplied by my amazing sponsors, for the sake of this video, we're using the retail price of all parts used to get the most accurate number.
So we may as well start with the most obvious part of the build, and that is of course the shell itself. So many people ask me where I got the shell from, but believe it or not, this started like any other project. This was a spontaneous Facebook Marketplace find. Nathan and I went on a 2,000-kilometer round trip to pick this thing up, and it was $10,000. At the time, I actually thought that was really expensive because I thought the shell wasn't in very good shape, but it turns out it just had a bunch of mold on it, and we actually got really lucky with the shell because it's a one-to-one direct copy of a Lamborghini Diablo, so it looks very accurate, and that's why a lot of people mistake it for the real thing. Oh, and fun fact, this kit was 63,000 Australian dollars when the first owner imported it here to Australia. Pretty crazy. Next up, we have the chassis that the shell is currently sitting on, and that is one of my favorite cars of all time, the BMW E36. We got really lucky with the fact that the E36 is the exact same wheelbase as a Lamborghini Diablo. Luckily, my friend Nathan had the E36 sitting on its side in his farm. It may have been the dirtiest E36 I've ever purchased, but it was a measly $250, so we'll take it. For the rest of the build, I figure we may as well start at the front and work our way back. So starting with the engine and gearbox package that we chose for this car, and that is in fact the 13B rotary motor out of a Mazda RX-8. I actually ended up buying a whole RX-8 for $7,000. We sold the shell for $2,000, meaning the engine and gearbox cost us $5,000. A lot of people ask me why I chose this motor, and it's pretty simple. A, it doesn't take up a lot of space, so it fits perfectly in our small engine bay, and B, it gives off major supercar vibes with all of the noises that this engine makes. Luckily, this is a fresh rebuilt motor from ProMaz in that car. It came with the receipts, and that gave me enough confidence to use this motor. Of course, as you can see here, the motor is not stock. We're running a Garrett 3582 ball bearing turbo on the side of this thing, along with a 44mm wastegate. Together, those were $1,200. Of course, we couldn't use an off-the-shelf turbo manifold for this thing because, well, the engine bay is so unique. So we got Bailey to fab up a custom turbo manifold for us, and that retail would cost you somewhere between $800 and $1,000. I'll go the lower end of the scale, so we'll put down $800. So making sure that when the boost gets into our motor, it's nice and cold, we're running a Phoenix intercooler. We're also running two Phoenix oil coolers in each corner of the front of our car. We're also running a Phoenix radiator rear mounted in the back of the car with a huge spout fan. I've paired all those together, and retail they are $1,880. We thrashed this car for 3 days straight last weekend, and it was almost 40 degrees every day in Adelaide. That video will be coming out soon, but somehow the car didn't overheat and it took the thrashing. That's a massive thanks to this Phoenix gear, so shout out Phoenix. Of course, turbos need oil, and that requires oil lines and fittings. I've also thrown the cost of the Mac valve for our electronic boost control in there as well, and in total those lines, fittings and the valve was $732. Then of course we've also got all the lines and fittings for our oil coolers going to our motor, and those cost a total of $507. Of course, these engines don't run themselves. We chose to go with a Haltech Elite 750 ECU along with a universal loom to run our motor, and that cost us $2,500. Now of course you'll notice we have a bunch of custom fab work here in the engine bay. Our good friend Bailey, who made our turbo manifold, also made our intake manifold, our intercooler piping, and our crazy exhaust. In total, that only cost us $3,000. Although I think if you went to any other fabricator, that's probably going to cost you double, but we'll leave it at $3,000. That's bloody cheap. We're also running a custom alternator on this thing, and that's actually out of an EF Falcon. That was $150. Hidden down the back here, we have a Raceworks LS coil bracket along with some LS coils. That was $470. Of course, we needed a clutch that could stand up to the extra power that we've put through this motor with the turbo, as well as the abusive drifting, so we put in an extreme performance clutch that cost us $729. Alright, we're on to the interior, and we're gonna start with the full body custom loom and wiring. There are so many relays and everything like that included in this kit. That was done by my friend Logan Speed Shop, and it cost us $2,500, including all the niggly little bits we had to buy. Honestly, he did such a good job, although I think he gave us a little bit of mates rates. Then we have our two-step garage, quick release, and steering wheel. That was $300. I may have just grabbed this off the shelf, but retail, that's $300. Then we have our beautiful GK Tech hydraulic handbrake, as well as all of our brake lines for our car. They were all made custom by GK Tech, which made them super easy to fit, and all up that was $589. Then we have these beautiful Raceworks seats. I literally built the car around these seats. And our pink Raceworks harnesses, that was $1,900. Next up, we have our custom pedals that we installed in this car. They were all just pedals that we bought from the wreckers, and they cost $250. We could have done a custom pedal box, but this build was done on a budget, and actually these pedals worked really well considering the lack of space that we had. And honestly, I've had zero issues with the pedals so far. The clutch pedal is out of a Mitsubishi Lancer. The brake pedal is out of a Suzuki Sierra or a Suzuki Safari, and the accelerator pedal is out of a Hyundai i30, which is pretty cool. For our power steering, we chose a Holden Astra power steering pump. They're really cheap, and the pump along with the lines and fittings cost us a total of $461. For our digital dash, we're running this very cool PowerTune 10-inch wide digital dash. It's got a full custom layout on it for our Lamborghini. This dash cost $1,600 from PowerTune, and it's worth it just to have that little logo in the center of the screen. As you can see, we're really posh, and we have suede on our dash. The dash actually came with the kit, but the suede cost us $200 off eBay. This stuff is absolutely awesome. It's really easy to lay, and it makes everything look great. I highly recommend it. Next up, we have a really special part of the car, not just because it keeps me safe, but because it's the coolest roll cage I've ever owned in any of my cars. Now, obviously, this is a pretty intricate roll cage, and it had to be because we've pulled so much steel out of this car. Chimera Development 3D scanned the car and created this roll cage in CAD, which is pretty insane. And retail price, this roll cage will set you back $6,500. So moving down to the back of the car, we have our Raceworks fuel system. So for our Raceworks 38-litre fuel tank, we've got our surge tank with 2 fuel pumps, an external fuel pump, all of our lines and fittings, and 4 1,100cc Raceworks injectors up the front. In total, that'll cost you $2,952. That's a lot of cheeseburgers. Since we have a rear-mounted radiator back here, we have to run coolant lines from the front of the engine all the way back to the back of the radiator. We're running Dash 16 braided lines and fittings. That was $1,119. Then we've got the electric water pump. That was $150. Powering everything in this car, we've got our rear top Optima battery. That was $350, as well as our Raceworks Optima battery clamp made specifically for that battery. That was $170. I love that clamp because it just keeps everything super tidy. So although we're running a pretty much stock BMW E36 rear end in this thing, it's still pretty custom. We welded in reinforcement plates into the back of this car because they're known for cracking. We've got custom bushes, custom suspension arms, and a fully custom axle kit in this car to keep up with the extra power that we're putting out with the 13B motor. In total, all of that, including our medium case welded diff, it cost us $2,260. Underneath this car, we're running custom Shockworks coilovers. They're literally the best coilovers you can buy in Australia. Depending on the setup that you want, the kits can range in price, but for us, I've put down $3,000. When we first went out in this car, we had too much grip dialed in, and that was simply because of the Shockworks. These things are next level. Of course, we have our custom made rear wing on this thing. This is actually a Rocket Bunny rear wing off a Toyota 86. We cut it in half, extended it to match the width of our car, which is now 2 meters wide. It's basically a surfboard. But one of the best things we ever did was cover this in suede, and it gets so many comments from everyone who comes and looks at this car. I absolutely love it. In total, including the modifications, this rear wing cost us $600. Custom designed and 3D printed rear tail light bezels, as well as our badges, $350. Of course, we couldn't just pick any wheels and tires for this thing. I wanted something super hot boy, and luckily I got an awesome deal on these wheels. These are Workmeister M1s. Once again, these were a killer Facebook Marketplace deal, and including wheels and tires, we paid $2,500. Now, of course, when you have a drift car, you need to be able to stop. We put custom brakes and rotors in this thing. They're just the stock E36 stuff, but they're drilled and slotted. They were $504. Then we have our crazy wheel spacers. Up front, we're we're running 25mm custom conversion spaces. That converts our stud pattern to 5x114.3 so we can run all of the Nissan wheels, which are really easy to find. But down the back here, we're running crazy 80mm spaces. Now, I don't have a problem with the size because these are fully custom built spaces here in Australia, very well made, and our spaces front and back cost us $400 from Wheel Mods. Up the front here, we're running a fully custom lock kit to give us all of that steering angle when we're drifting. That includes LCAs, tie rods, and everything. That's $1,400. Then we have all of the custom windows that we got made for the car. We 3D scanned and designed these. Then we got Southeast Plastics here in Melbourne to cut these out. Believe it or not, these were only $330, which I think is an absolute bargain. I was honestly expecting somewhere around $1,000, so I'm pretty happy with that. We've got our Project Aero custom front and side splitters. Now these add a bunch of aggression to the overall look of the car, but they also protect the underside of the car as well, especially when we're loading it up on the trailer. These were $375. Oh yeah, then we've got all of the lights in the car. They only cost us $150 in total. Most of them were off eBay. Most of them are light bars or trailer lights, but they seem to work pretty darn well, so happy enough with that. So before we get to the grand total, we need to knock a couple of mundane things off the list. First of all, we got the steel. All the steel that we welded into this car, steel plate for the floor and the boot, covering the firewall, everything like that, that cost $600. Then we've got all of the hardware we used in the car, the random bolts, the dress-up washers, everything like that, that was $150. We've got the MIG welding gas and the wire that we used, that was $250. Then there's all the paint that we used on the car, painting the engine bay, painting the interior, the cage, all of that, that was $350. Then we've got the oils, the gaskets, the sealants, everything like that. That was $400. And of course, let's not forget the dyno tune for the motor. Generally speaking, that's about $1,000. And of course, last but not least, we have this insane vinyl wrap and livery that completely transformed the car. The Midnight Purple vinyl wrap was laid by the boys here in Melbourne at Wrapped Up. Andrew and Timmy did an insane job and they didn't charge me much at all, $2,500. I do remember Andrew mentioning that this wrap should cost somewhere around $4,000, but we're gonna leave it at $2,500. Then we have this insane livery. AWS Graphics knocked this livery out of the park. He completely designed it from the ground up, listened to everything that I had to say. We did so many revisions. So Andrew, if you're watching this, I am sorry, but this livery, $1,000. But that's just the design of this livery. Then we had to print and lay it. Mark and the boys at Sequoia Media absolutely killed it. We had a blast doing this. Once again, they completely hooked me up. I'm pretty sure it should have cost somewhere around $2,500, but those boys hooked me up and it cost $1,500, worth every penny. This livery looks absolutely amazing. And that leaves us with a grand total of $66,445 to build this car. Now, I'm pretty sure I missed out a bunch of things on that list. And if you told me at the start of the process that it was gonna cost $66,445 to build this car, I'm not gonna lie, I probably would have lost sleep deciding whether or not to pull the pin on the build. But the best thing about building something like this, you never know how much it's gonna cost going into it. And they do say ignorance is bliss. Well, there you have it, the total cost of building our fake Lamborghini drift car. Was it easy? Nah. Was it cheap? Absolutely not. Was it worth it? 150%. Seeing everyone's reactions every time they look at this car makes every hour and every dollar spent on this thing absolutely worth it. Now, bearing in mind we haven't taken into account the around 1,000 hours it took us to build this thing. And even if you charged a measly $50 an hour, that would be $50,000 in labor. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. This build was full of challenges, fabrication headaches, budget stress, long nights, and plenty of moments whether I wondered whether it was even possible. But that's the thing about building cars. It's not just about the money or the parts. It's about the journey. The skills you gain, the problems you solve, and the satisfaction of stepping back and saying, yeah, I built that. If you've got a dream build in your head, don't let the doubt stop you. Start where you are, use what you have, and make it happen. Whether it's a drift missile, a show car, or some crazy project that no one believes in, I say give it a crack. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the total costs in the comments below and whether you'd ever think about building something like this. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? We're almost at 100K subscribers. Until the next video, thank you guys so much. Peace. Bye.